I'll try my best. Hello, my name is Julia Lawton, Associate Director at Achieving the Dream in Integrated Student Support Area. Thank you again. I will echo the thank you for braving this weather. I don't know if you're aware, but it's also snowing in England, where I'm from, and everything shuts down with the sight of one flake. The whole country. I went on the BBC website this morning and it said, Ireland shuts down. And I was like, I didn't think it could do that. But there's no flights, no nothing. So I'm really glad that you braved it and came out to be with us today. So as I said, my name is Julia Lawton. For those of you that weren't at the Institute last October, I am in the Integrated Student Support area. So I've been working with 26, 2 and 4 year institutions over the last 3 years on advising and planning redesign. And last time we had, that one has a broader range. Last time we had my colleague Mei Yen, who is the director in this area, and also my colleague Camille Powell kind of present to you and talk to you about this work as a foundation. I'm really excited that today I have my colleague Laurie Fladd from Trident, who is also going to kind of share some of her experience of actually doing this work on the ground and what this looked like at her college. So I'm going to ask her to briefly provide a kind of welcome and say who she is.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me? I have a loud voice, so usually that's not a problem for me. So I come to you, I grew up in Albany, New York, but have spent the last 20 years in Charleston, South Carolina. So the Albany girl looks at the snow and says, meh, but I've been in Charleston long enough that a few flakes is actually very exciting because I really don't see snow all that much. But in Charleston, this would completely shut us down. Completely shut us down. Nobody would be driving, or forget flying. We wouldn't be driving, hardly even walking outside. So thank you for coming. I flew in last night, just barely made it in before the rain started. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm the Associate Dean of Science and Math at Trident Technical College. I'm also the Director of Academic Advising. I'm also the Project Director for the IPASS grant. And I'm currently the interim department head for physical sciences. So I was really glad to get out of the office and come do something else today. But we have been doing Advising Redesign for the last 3 years. We have been sort of eyeballs deep in it. So I have a lot of insight, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We have made lots of progress. We were an IPASS 2 school with lots of support from our administrators. So we have been very fortunate to make some good progress, thanks to the support from Achieving the Dream and also from our internal support system as well. So I'm really happy today. I'm going to get to share a few things with you. Happy to answer any questions you might have about sort of what this work looks like in real life with real people and students. And I'm really glad to be here. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Laurie. She's definitely worth a clap, don't worry. So first, I want to start by, if we can show of hands, who was here at the Institute in October? Okay, that's a good number of you, so most of you. So hopefully this is kind of going to build on all of that work, as well as all of the work you've been doing in kind of other areas. So I know you're doing the Pathways Scale of Adoption Assessment right now at your institutions, and that should kind of feed into the work you do today. If you're working with a coach on advising redesign, the work you're doing with them, the action plan you're developing with them should also feed into what you do today. The kind of work we started together in the last institute, as well as the discovery inventory that you may have started before as pre-work for the last institute, all of that should lead into what we're doing today. So I hope that you see this kind of builds on that and it integrates with all of the other work that's taking place, rather than being kind of this separate advising redesign over here in the corner. So first, this is what we're planning to get out of today. So one of the things we started talking about last time was the importance of having a vision that can lead and guide people in this work, and then some kind of overarching goals to work towards over the next few years. And so one of the things we want to start today with is kind of reflecting on where we've been, and then kind of moving forward into thinking about where we want to go. What we're not going to walk away with is a refined, perfect vision with all of our goals mapped out and perfectly worded. We're going to get started today, and obviously we've only got 5 hours together, and we're hoping to get you out on time, if not a little bit early. so that you can get home safely. But we also want to make sure that you have a strong start to kind of the next steps of an action plan for how to achieve one of those goals. So you've got a worksheet on your table that will take us through today. And it looks like this. If you've not got one per person, we've got a few more on the table up here, so we can kind of hand those out as we get started. But you can also download it online. There's a link at the top so that you can actually start writing on it in Word, if you prefer that. And so finally, before we leave, I hope that we can kind of give you some advice on some resources, some additional tools that can be useful for you as you're getting started with this. Hopefully, in addition to the Student Success Center and kind of each other, you'll kind of use Achieving the Dream and Laurie as well as resources as you need them. One of the most important and valuable things that we've learned from the IPAS grant for this kind of work is just talking through challenges with other people who've been through it or are going through it is really, really valuable for helping kind of move the work forward and get unstuck. So these are the kind of topics or areas that we're going to work on today. The first is kind of, as I said, a reflection on what's happened in the last 3 or 4 months since we were last together, and then kind of looking forward to what your vision may be or what you want to achieve for your students. Then Laurie is going to provide kind of a bit of context around what her college did, the changes in processes that they made, how they kind of changed the way people do their jobs on a daily basis, as well as some of the other changes that went on in the culture and structure at Trident. We're going to work this afternoon more as teams, really focusing on strategy execution and the action plan. So once you have your goals, what are the milestones that will lead up to it, and what are the specific steps over the next 6 months we're going to be taking to achieve that? And then we're going to end with, as we did last time, the fun part of looking at data. I know we kind of cut it a little bit short last time, talking about how you actually create a data plan. But what we're going to do now is kind of break it down even further so that we can kind of get started on developing a data plan to kind of help it inform the way you implement this work. So before we get started, I'm going to do a quick 5-minute flash recap of what this is. If you didn't attend the last institute, hopefully you read chapter 1 of the toolkit. If you do not have a printed toolkit, we've got some cards up the front where you can download it for free right now, for those of you who want to have it in front of you. But essentially, I want to make sure we're on the same page about what we're talking about, and just kind of as a refresher, because it has been 4 months since we were last together. So the first is, what are we trying to do? What prompted this work? And what we found on a national scale is that the current higher education system treats students as if their kind of education needs are different from their career needs, and are different from their kind of personal or financial situation. And so the services that we provide are therefore fragmented, and they don't treat the whole student. And so a lot of it goes back to efficiency as well. With limited resources, with dwindling resources, frankly, it's really difficult to be able to provide in-depth support to every student. And frankly, it's impossible to be able to do that as a community college. And so what this ends up doing is defaulting to efficiency. So our advisors become more registration clerks than actual advisors. They're not able to, with a caseload of 600, 700 students, actually know their students and be able to support them. It's just not possible. We also know that we tend to take an inoculation approach to this. So orientation tends to happen in a half day or a full day at the start of semester, in person or online, and we kind of give the students all the information they'll need, and then we see them later, and we're like, don't forget to see your advisor, don't forget to go to financial aid and complete your FAFSA. And so it's not kind of as useful as kind of ongoing support or just-in-time support. We also know that staff and faculty are overburdened. This doesn't just go back to the financial piece. There's a lot to do at a college, and we're just never going to be able to hire all of the faculty and staff that we need to be able to fully support students. And this also impacts the quality of the technology that we have. So we are often using systems that are 10, 15 years old, and in this day and age, that is really old. For knowing that how quickly things are changing, there's so many new technologies out there that can help make our lives easier so that we can redirect our time towards something more meaningful for our students. We also know that you're doing plenty of other things in addition to your day jobs. Dev Ed Redesign, we know there's math pathways out there, you've got pathways reform as a whole, and it kind of making sure that those are connected is really challenging today. So that's where we are, and what we're trying to get to through integrated student support is a more seamless, integrated approach to supporting students. And so what this looks like is making sure that they have not only an academic plan that takes them through to completion and can kind of change with their changing needs, but also is aligned with their career plans, where they want to go, what they want to achieve, and is also underlaid by a financial plan. So, okay, you know where you want to go, but how are you actually going to make sure you have the money and the time to get there? It's also trying to get to students only having to tell their story one time, so that they don't have this ping-pong effect where they're going to different offices or different buildings to figure out what they need to figure out to continue and reach class. Making sure that we're being proactive, not just in kind of like a proactive email or proactive text, but that all of the way we approach students is really trying to get them to know them up front, and then kind of making sure our supports are designed to reach them where they are, when they need to be reached. And then finally, the other piece is making sure that students feel like they belong on campus. It's really critical to students to know that they are seen as valued, that they can achieve the goals that they set out for themselves, and for them to believe that the institution believes that they can, and that their faculty and that the advisors believe that they belong on campus and can achieve those goals as well. And so these are the 4 areas in particular we're working on thinking about, and you won't be able to kind of redesign or kind of look through all of them at one time. It's way too much, way too many services at once to look at, which is why colleges like Trident have been going through this for years and have been tackling small pieces and parts of it at one time. But essentially looking at education, career and financial planning, counseling, advising and coaching, and kind of redefining what those roles are. Early alerts and intervention targeting, so making sure that students get what they need when they need it. And then thinking further into the future about how this aligns with the local labour market and also transfer. And so you'll remember these 5 principles from last time. They come from CCRC's research and others' research into what student supports look like when they're well designed and delivered. So going back to not being an inoculator, so going through sustained support to students from the beginning when they kind of first have interest in the college, all the way through to when they graduate and leave to transition to either the career or another 4-year institution. Making sure it's strategic, so we can actually get the students who need the most support, that support, and that the students that don't need certain supports don't get those supports. Integrated, so this is the central component of it, and when we're talking about integration, we talk about the technology piece, making sure your technologies speak to each other, that it's easy for people to access the technologies they need. But also on the people side, so it's integrating siloed departments, different committees, all of the different work that's going on, and making sure that the services act as kind of a collaborative approach to supporting students. Proactive, going back to what I said before, so that students actually don't need to necessarily request the service. They don't have to seek it out for themselves, but even before sometimes they know that they need it, they get that support. And then personalized, so going back to students having a relationship with the campus, with the people on campus, and even if the person that they know isn't the right person to support them in this area, they know who to go to that can direct them to the right person. And so we found that there are 5 institutional practices, and this slide you may not have seen before unless you were at Dream last week. So these are some of the practices that we've distilled from the IPAS colleges that have worked to help them actually achieve those design principles and the goal that we have for how we support our students. The first is establishing a shared responsibility. So that's shared across departments, shared with administration, with all the way through the college, but also shared with the student, so that we're not taking away the responsibility and trying to do something for them, but that we're helping to develop them to become leaders of their own education. Building meaningful relationships, so having 1 or 2 people on campus that a student knows and can go and talk to and feels comfortable with is really important, particularly for certain student groups like first generation students, to have that to be able to go and find the support they need. Being able to monitor student progress, because we know that their lives are not the same from when they start as when they end. Things happen along the way, so being able to monitor how they're moving through the institution is critical to be able to providing the support they need at the time they need it. Leveraging targeted data and technology across the whole institution so that we're all kind of using the same technology and the right data at the points we need to, and that we're able to do that, so providing the training and support people need to be able to do that. And then reimagining policies and practices. So this goes beyond just looking at what your policies are, but making sure that you enforce new policies or existing policies. Often colleges say they have mandatory advising, but it's not mandatory, it's not enforced, so it's not mandatory. Or they kind of look at they try to implement a new protocol, but they're not putting it in job descriptions, for example. So they're not actually holding anyone accountable to it. And so for us at ATD, this is an equity issue. This goes beyond kind of just the right thing to do for students in general, and goes to the need to close achievement gaps. So we all know that achievement gaps across multiple different student groups need some focus, and there are two different ways of doing it. So you've got on the left the kind of equity interventions you think of when someone says the word equity to you. They're things like making sure student groups exist, so minority male mentoring support groups, or training for faculty and staff, or affinity groups or safe space training. Those are the kind of traditional interventions that you think of when you think of equity work, and it's really critical to do those things. But from our perspective, it's also important to note that those don't change the system in which the students operate and in which we operate. So looking towards how the policies are set, what policies exist and how they impact different student groups is critical, as well as looking at the structure of our organization, of how we lay everything out. The hierarchy and how we govern the college as well is important. And so all of this work is getting to that piece. When you're redesigning your policies and re-looking at all of the work that you do, making sure that you have that equity lens is critical to making sure that this doesn't reinforce some of the existing kind of inequities at your institution. Okay. So we're going to start with our first activity. So on your sheet, you'll see it's pages 1 to 3 of the worksheet, but we're going to split it up a bit. So page 1 is where we're going to reflect on our progress since the last institute, and there are two different options for this. For those of you who have completed the next two columns of the discovery inventory, looking at kind of the areas you want to improve on, or the areas you may need to change, there are 3 questions at the bottom that we want you to talk about. We know the discovery inventory is long and takes a lot of work, so for those of you who have not got around to doing that yet or have prioritized other kind of assessments, there are 3 questions at the top that we want you to think of. And this goes back to bringing in some of the work you started at the last institute. We kind of put together a 4-month action plan towards the end of the last day together, and it was a worksheet called Beginning to Plan for Action. So if you have that on your laptop or at hand, please bring that in as well into your discussions, as well as any other action plan or kind of pieces, assessments that you've been doing over the last few months. So we're going to give you 10 minutes to kind of talk with your team about these 3 questions, whichever set of 3 that you choose. And then we're going to ask a couple of you to kind of report out on one thing that you're really proud of that you've done over the last 4 months. So 10 minutes will take us to just before 20 past 10, and then we'll come back together. And Laurie and I will walk around and you can kind of ask us questions. Thank you for responding. So we're going to come back together now, and what we want to do is hear from a couple of you one kind of piece of progress that you're proud of, however big or small it may sound. Share some of that. And then one of the challenges that you've already run into. I'm sure there's not any of them. Any of us are running into challenges, not even time. But so we're going to run the mic. So does anyone want to start with one kind of piece of progress they're happy to share? Right.
Buenos días. That's good morning for all of us that speak Spanish. And it's a good way of integrating our students too. Some of my friends that are here at my table from Essex County College, which is the organization that I represent today, are learning some Spanish so that we can make the experience of all the students a little bit more like approachable. So one of the things that they're talking, because I'm a newbie here, okay, so I'm a rookie. We're talking that from last year, from when they came to the first experience to this, they brought all these ideas about we all are like different units and departments, but necessarily we communicated at the kind of like official level, but not really, because we always communicated, you know, like facts and achievements and numbers, and that was good. But when we came together as a cohesive group to talk about the experience and how approachable we were as a whole line, we agreed that we all wanted to provide an experience, so we've been able to sit interdepartmentally, not to talk about statistics and numbers and strategies, but to talk about how do we make it so cohesive that the student doesn't feel like he's in the middle of a tennis ball, no? Go to this department, now you do that. So we've been able to sit together, and we have from the application, which is recruitment and admissions, to the advisors, which is the second point of a step for a student. Then they go to the faculty that they're gonna see on the department, and if any additional superpower, like advice is needed, our counselors are there. So we're talking to each other since then to this point, and kind of like agreeing on what else can we do so that a student feels that this is just one streamline of a single experience and not separate individual experiences. So to me, that has been incredible. It's just the beginning, but wait for surprises, okay?
Thank you. Who wants to go next? One piece of progress, one challenge. Laurie, do you want to pick a table?
Sure. One piece of progress, one good thing, doesn't have to be huge. Oh, there we go.
Thank you. Wait long enough.
Good morning, everybody. I'm LaTanya from Mercer County Community College. We've been working with Mercer, has the pleasure of having a Title III grant. I'm the project director of that. So we have additional funding to help us in this process. Doesn't mean we know quite what we're doing yet, but we know it's pieces along the way, and we're doing a lot of work, but now we're trying to make it more cohesive. So the biggest thing for us is try to develop a way of case management. One, without introducing a new tool, becoming more acquainted with the tools we have, and to know the more that we can do with them, and also to find a way to be able to monitor our students. Because we don't have an active retention alert piece right now. Not that we don't have access to it, it's like we really don't want to turn it on because we don't want to dump all the referrals onto 3 people. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about, right? So trying to find ways to be able to monitor your students' progress. We are actively working to be proactive. We're doing really, really good inroads with that. Because what we've done as a workaround is to create Blackboard shells. So as if it's a course, the students underneath my class are now seeing an additional Blackboard shell, giving it a catchy phrase to encourage them to open up that shell. And in that shell, they don't know that now they are a select cohort of students that are being monitored by one of my individual divisions. So we have 3 academic divisions. We have 3 full-time success coaches that are being paid for out of our Title III grant, and we have additional co-coaches as well. This is in addition to our intake advisors we've always had. But of course, we're all short on personnel, so all the coaches also have to assist with registration in those peak times and cover our intake for the enrollment services. But by having these Blackboard shells, then the coaches can be empowered to do an individualized messaging to their groups of students, to be proactive, to have those reminders. This is who you can come to connect with me, to have that personalization. So I can go on and on, but I'll stop. Okay.
Great. You guys have been doing some work. It's very, very good. The approach you're taking with the technology is really great. A lot of the time we have technology that can do all these things, but we see something flashy and we're like, but that would be great, but you don't need it. Do you actually need that $70,000 a year flashy system, or could you use the system that you have already? Yeah. You're not alone in that.
Yeah, we have Blackboard show.
Blackboard shells. Okay. So no one had any challenges.
No challenges? This is
We have,
Oh,
I
there
have
are
one
people.
challenge. Okay, great.
All right. So I'm Becky Davis from Hudson County Community College, and last fall we actually began assigning counselors by meta major. So this is the first time because we kind of function as a urgent care. Students walk in as they need to. So currently, and so this is the first time that students could actually look on their academic planning and see a name of a person to contact. We reached out to them, and we try to triage them at the front if they still came for a walk-in to somebody within their meta major full-time, or our part-time counselors are also assigned by meta major, so that even if students came as walk-in, they were still being served. Challenges with that at the same time is we now want to get much more intentional and consistent in our outreach to our students, because as we know, it's registration comes quick and often, even though you feel like you just finished it and now it's coming, it's like, but it's only been a week, right? And you realize it's been a month. So managing the tidal wave that comes with that, as well as the day-to-day needs of the office and our programming. We also actually found an interesting feature through academic planning that we didn't know was turned on at the time, but so this shows us students want advising, and in this way, they were submitting their schedules for the advisors to approve, and advisors were like, wait, what is this? So that they're actually asking, being proactive in their planning, which is what we want them to do. We began mapping out some of the meta majors on our campus, and so some of them we can see are much more smooth than others. So for example, in our social science division, we're getting caught up in the history sequence since it's so different across the board. So now we're having conversations about our curriculum, and so it's bringing in multiple departments, because these are things that you can't just wave a wand and go, yeah, we'll do this instead. That has to be multiple departments in agreement. So those would be, yeah, so some of our progress and challenges.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to start looking forward now. Hopefully you're listening to what other people are doing, and if some of it sounds good, you can kind of connect with them over lunch to see how they're doing it. So that pages 2 and 3 of your worksheet are looking more at the vision or components of the ideal student experience that you want to see. This can be phrases, it can be full sentences, it can be kind of words that describe the experience you want students to have. It does not have to be a full vision of 3 or 4 sentences that you are wordsmithing. So we want you to spend a bit of time kind of working on that. But we have about 25 minutes, and what we want most out of this 25 minutes is to have at least 1 or 2 goals on page 3 written out. And when we're talking about goals, we're talking about something that is 2 or 3 years down the line of being able to be achieved. It's something that is a bit visionary, but you can kind of walk back and be very specific about how you're going to get there. And so your discovery inventory, whether it's completed just the first column or other columns, should be really useful for this. If you have action plans that you worked on with your coaches, or any of your pathways assessment that's been done, those should all be really useful tools for you. So what we want you to do is spend some time first kind of thinking about the components of the student experience, and then kind of move on to developing at least 1 or 2 goals. For the rest of today, we're going to be focusing on only one of the goals this afternoon as we build out the plan, which is why we need at least one of those goals written down. So we're going to give you about 25 minutes on that. We'll come round, we can kind of answer questions, help you think through it. But we really want you to spend this time kind of talking to each other based on your experience of where you want to go. Some of you may already have that or may already have a vision, and that's great, and you should use that to kind of inform the components of the student experience you want to see. So 25 minutes, we'll come back together and we'll kind of catch up together.